The weight of the day clung to me like damp clothes, heavy and unyielding. My shoulders screamed from hours hunched over a laptop, chasing deadlines that never seemed to end. I stumbled into our cramped Brooklyn apartment, desperate for relief, and saw Eli sprawled on the couch, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he scrolled through his phone. Rough day? Eli's voice was low, teasing, but there was a warmth in it that always caught me off guard. He glanced up, his hazel eyes glinting under the dim glow of our thrift store lamp. I groaned, dropping my bag by the door, and muttered something about my back being a knot of pure misery. Want me to help? He offered, sitting up. His tone was casual, but the air shifted, like the moment before a storm breaks. I hesitated, my pulse quickening for reasons I couldn't name. Eli was my roommate, my best friend since college, the guy who'd seen me at my worst and still stuck around. A massage was just a massage, right? So why did the thought of his hands on me feel like stepping off a cliff? Sure, I said, my voice betraying a tremor. I sat on the floor in front of the couch, trying to act normal, but my heart was a traitor, hammering loud enough I swore he could hear it. Eli moved behind me, his knees brushing my sides as he settled in. His hands hovered for a second, then pressed into my shoulders, firm and sure, unraveling the tension in my muscles, but igniting something else entirely. I'd known Eli for 3 years, ever since we bonded over late-night pizza and existential crises during freshman year at NYU. He was the charming one, the guy who could talk his way out of anything, with a laugh that made you feel like you were in on the joke. I was the quiet one, the overthinker, always analyzing, always holding back. We balanced each other, or so I thought, until his fingers traced slow circles down my spine, and every wall I'd built started to crumble. Relax, Caleb, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I tried to laugh it off, to say something snarky, but my words caught in my throat. His touch was deliberate, not just easing the knots, but lingering, like he was searching for something more. I should have stopped him. I should have laughed and pulled away, kept things safe. But I didn't. I leaned into it, letting the heat of his hands blur the line between friendship and something I wasn't ready to name. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the city outside and the soft creak of the couch as Eli shifted closer. My mind raced. Why was this different? Why did his touch feel like it was rewriting something inside me? I'd spent years convincing myself I was straight, that the fleeting thoughts I had about guys were just confusion, just a phase. But Eli's hands, steady and knowing, were pulling those thoughts to the surface, and I wasn't sure I could push them back down. You're tense, he said, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. What's going on in that head of yours? I could feel his eyes on me, even though I didn't dare turn around. He didn't know how his touch was unraveling years of denial, how it was making me question everything I thought I was. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why his hands lingered, why his fingers brushed the nape of my neck just a second too long. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Just work. I lied, but the word felt hollow. Eli didn't push, but his silence was louder than any question. His hands moved lower, tracing the edges of my shoulder blades, and I felt a shiver I couldn't hide. This wasn't just a massage anymore. It was a conversation without words, a confession I wasn't ready to make. The city lights flickered through the window, casting shadows across the room. I wanted to say something, to break the tension, but my voice was gone. All I could do was sit there, caught between fear and want, as Eli's hands kept going, and my feelings followed, reckless and unstoppable. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving. I woke up on the couch, a blanket draped over me that I didn't remember grabbing. Eli was already in the kitchen, humming off-key as he brewed coffee, acting like nothing had changed. But everything had. My skin still burned where his hands had been, and my thoughts were a tangled mess of guilt and longing. I avoided his eyes as I grabbed a mug, muttering a quick thanks for the coffee. He leaned against the counter, watching me with that half-smile that always made my stomach flip. "You sleep okay?" he asked, like he hadn't turned my world upside down last night. I nodded, my throat tight, and busied myself with stirring sugar I didn't even want. I needed space, distance, something to stop the chaos in my head. Work was a blur. I sat at my desk, staring at spreadsheets, but all I could think about was Eli's hands, his voice, the way he'd looked at me like he saw something I was too scared to admit. I'd grown up in a small town in Ohio, where different wasn't a word people used kindly. My parents were good people, but their world was black and white marriage, kids, church on Sundays. I'd buried any doubts about myself deep, convinced I could outrun them. But last night, Eli's touch had dug them up, and now they were staring me in the face. By the time I got home, the apartment felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Eli was on the couch again, reading a dog-eared paperback. He looked up, and for a second, I thought I saw something in his eyes: hope. Maybe. Or expectation. "You okay, man?" he asked, setting the book down. His voice was gentle, but it carried a weight that made my chest ache. "Yeah," I said, too quickly. I dropped my bag and headed for my room. But Eli stood, blocking my path. Not aggressively. Just there. Like he wasn't ready to let me run. "Caleb," he said, his voice low. "If I crossed a line last night, tell me. I don't want things to be weird." My heart pounded. He was giving me an out, a way to pretend it was nothing. But the truth was clawing its way out, and I was tired of fighting it. "You didn't," I said, barely above a whisper. His eyes widened, just a fraction, and I saw the question he didn't ask. I wanted to say more, to tell him how his touch had cracked open something I'd locked away. But fear stopped me cold. Instead, I mumbled something about needing a shower and bolted. Under the hot water, I tried to wash away the confusion, but it clung to me. I thought about Eli's easy laugh, the way he'd always been there, the way he'd looked at me last night. Had he felt it too? Or was I reading too much into a moment that meant nothing to him? When I came out, Eli was gone, probably at his bartending shift. The apartment felt empty without him, and I hated how much that bothered me. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where he'd been, and noticed his book still open on the armrest. A sticky note was tucked inside, his messy handwriting scrawled across it. "Talk to me. Caleb. I'm here." My breath caught. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I wanted to text him, to call, to say something, but my phone stayed silent in my hand. Instead, I pulled the blanket over Meth, same one from last night, and let the weight of his words settle in. I was scared, but for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep running. Days passed, and I turned avoidance into an art form. I left for work early, came home late, and kept conversations with Eli short and surface level. But every glance, every brush of his arm as we passed in the kitchen, felt like a spark on dry tinder. I was burning up inside, and he was the flame I couldn't escape. Friday night, Eli cornered me. I was rummaging through the fridge, pretending to care about leftovers, when he leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're dodging me," he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a flicker of hurt that cut deeper than I expected. "I'm not," I lied, closing the fridge door harder than I meant to. He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Caleb, come on. You've been a ghost all week. If it's about the other night, just say it." His tone was gentle, but there was an edge to it, like he was bracing for rejection. I wanted to tell him everything, how his touch had woken something in me, how I was terrified of what it meant, how I couldn't stop thinking about him. But the words felt too big, too dangerous. Instead, I shrugged, muttering, "It's just been a long week." Eli's face fell, and I hated myself for it. He didn't push, but he didn't let it go either. "Come out with me tonight," he said, his voice lighter now, like he was trying to bridge the gap. "Just us. Some drinks. Like old times. You can't hide forever." There was a challenge in his smile, and damn if it didn't pull me in. We ended up at a dive bar in Williamsburg, all sticky floors and neon signs. Eli was in his element, charming the bartender, laughing too loud, pulling me into his orbit. I tried to keep up, to act normal, but every time his knee bumped mine under the table, my heart stuttered. After a few beers, my guard slipped, and I let myself look at him really look. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way his hands moved when he talked, animated and alive. He was beautiful, and it hit me like a punch. "You're staring," Eli said, catching me. His grin was playful, but his eyes were searching, like he was waiting for me to make a move. I froze, heat creeping up my neck. "Just thinking," I mumbled, taking a long sip of my drink to cover the panic. "About what?" He pressed, leaning closer. The bar noise faded, and it was just us. The air between us charged. I could have lied again, could have deflected, but the beer and his closeness made me reckless. "About you," I said, my voice barely audible. His breath hitched, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, soft and real, and reached for my hand under the table. His fingers brushed mine, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. I curled my fingers around his, and the world tilted. "Caleb," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to figure it all out tonight. But I'm here. Okay?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. His hand stayed in mine, warm and steady, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning. We sat there, hands linked, as the bar buzzed around us, and I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop running, to let this whatever it was grow. The walk home was quiet, our footsteps echoing on the empty Brooklyn streets. Eli's hand brushed mine as we walked, not quite holding but close enough to make my pulse race. Neither of us mentioned the bar, the way our hands had locked together. But the silence wasn't heavy, it was alive, full of possibilities I was too scared to name. Back at the apartment, Eli lingered by the couch, his eyes catching mine in the dim light. "You want to talk?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. I wanted to say yes, to spill everything, the fear, the want, the years of hiding, but my courage faltered. "Not tonight," I said, forcing a smile. He nodded, but the disappointment in his eyes stung. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, the massage, the bar, his hand in mine. I thought about my family, the small-town whispers I'd grown up with, the weight of expectations I'd carried to New York. I thought about Eli, how he'd always been there, how he'd seen me in ways no one else had. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I couldn't keep dodging this. Eli was at the kitchen table when I woke up, sketching in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, and his smile was cautious, like he wasn't sure where we stood. "Coffee's fresh," he said, nodding toward the pot. I poured a cup, my hands shaking slightly, and sat across from him. "Eli," I started, my voice rough. "About the other night," I trailed off, searching for words. He set his pencil down, giving me his full attention, and it was both terrifying and grounding. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "That massage, the bear, it's messing with my head. I didn't think I was." He leaned forward, his eyes soft but intense. "You don't have to label it, Caleb." "Not yet. Just tell me what you feel." His voice was a lifeline, pulling me toward honesty. I took a breath, my heart pounding. "I feel you all the time, and it scares the hell out of me." For a moment, he didn't move, and I thought I'd ruined everything. Then he reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "It scares me too," he said quietly. "But I've known how I feel about you for a while. I just didn't know if you'd ever feel the same." His words hit like a wave, washing away the last of my defenses. He'd known. He'd waited. I wanted to ask how long, why he hadn't said anything, but all I could do was hold his hand tighter. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eli smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. "We figure it out together." He stood, pulling me up with him, and before I could overthink it, he hugged me. It wasn't like the massage, tentative and charged. It was warm, solid, like coming home. I buried my face in his shoulder, letting myself feel it, letting myself want. We spent the day together, not doing much coffee, a walk in the park, takeout on the couch. But every moment felt new, like we were stepping into uncharted territory. I was still scared, still unsure, but with Eli beside me, it felt like maybe I could face it. The next week was a blur of stolen glances and tentative touches. Eli and I didn't define what was happening, but we didn't need to. It was in the way he'd nudge my shoulder when we cooked dinner, the way I'd linger when handing him a beer. We were testing the waters, and every step felt like a leap. But the world outside our apartment wasn't so gentle. I started noticing things I'd ignored before: sideways glances from coworkers when I mentioned Eli. The way my parents' voices tightened when I talked about my life in New York. I hadn't told them anything, but the thought of it made my stomach churn. What would they say if they knew? What would they think of me? One night, Eli came home late from his shift, his usual grin replaced by a tight jaw. "Rough night?" I asked, trying to keep things light. He sighed, tossing his keys on the counter. Some drunk guy at the bar wouldn't shut up about fags ruining everything. Got under my skin. My heart sank. Eli was out. Had been since high school. But I'd never seen him shaken like this. I wanted to say something, to make it better. But all I could do was sit beside him on the couch. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling useless. He shook his head, his hand finding mine. "Not your fault. Just reminds me why I don't go home much." I knew about Eli's family: his dad's silence, his mom's pray-it-away phase. He'd made peace with it, mostly, but I could see the hurt lingering. It made me think of my own parents, their expectations, their quiet judgment. What if I can't do this? I blurted out, my voice cracking. What if I'm not brave enough? Eli turned to me, his eyes fierce. "You're braver than you think. Caleb. You're here, aren't you? With me." His words hit hard, and before I knew it, I was leaning in, closing the distance between us. Our lips met, hesitant at first, then desperate, like we'd both been holding our breath for too long. It was my first kiss with a guy, with anyone, and it felt like the world was rewriting itself. When we pulled apart, my heart was racing, but I wasn't scared anymore. Eli's forehead rested against mine, his breath uneven. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he whispered. I laughed, shaky but real. "Me too. I just didn't know it." We stayed like that, tangled together on the couch, until the city's hum faded into the background. For the first time, I let myself believe this could be real, not just a moment, but something lasting. But in the back of my mind, I knew the world wasn't done testing us, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. Reality hit hard the next morning. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom, asking when I was coming home for Thanksgiving. The thought of facing my family, of explaining Eli, made my chest tight. I hadn't even told them I was questioning, let alone that I was falling for my roommate. Eli noticed my mood at breakfast, his brow furrowing. "You okay?" he asked, pouring me coffee. I hesitated, then showed him the text. He read it, his expression softening. "You don't have to tell them anything yet," he said. "But if you do, I'll be there. Whatever you need." His hand brushed mine, and I wanted to believe it could be that simple. But it wasn't. A few days later, we went to a friend's art gallery opening in Manhattan. It was crowded, loud, the kind of place where you could lose yourself in the chaos. Eli was by my side, laughing, introducing me to people, his hand occasionally grazing my back. I felt alive, like I was finally stepping into my own skin. But then I saw a himmy old high school friend, Jake, across the room, staring. Jake and I had grown up together, shared secrets, played football. He was the kind of guy who'd call you out for wearing the wrong sneakers, let alone something bigger. I froze, my heart pounding as he made his way over. "Caleb. Man. Been a while," he said, his smile tight. His eyes flicked to Eli, then back to me, lingering on the way Eli's hand rested on my arm. "Yeah. Good to see you," I managed, my voice stiff. Eli picked up on it, stepping closer, his presence grounding me. Jake's gaze sharpened, and I could feel the judgment radiating off him. "So, you two, roommates?" he asked, the word heavy with implication. I nodded, my throat dry, but Eli just grinned, unfazed. "Best roommate I've ever had," he said, his tone light but firm. Jake didn't push, but his smirk stayed with me, a reminder of the world I'd left behind. On the subway home, Eli was quiet, sensing my unease. "You don't owe him anything," he said finally, his voice low. "Or anyone." I nodded, but the weight of Jake's stare lingered, stirring up old fears. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the thought of my family, my hometown, the life I'd been running from. Eli knocked on my door, leaning against the frame. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head, and he sat beside me, his hand finding mine. "We're in this together," he said, and I wanted to believe him. But as I looked at him, so sure, so open, I wondered if I could ever be that brave. Thanksgiving loomed like a storm cloud. I hadn't decided whether to go home, but the pressure was mounting. Texts from my mom, voicemails from my dad, all asking when I'd be back in Ohio. Eli sensed my stress, but didn't push, just stayed close, his presence a quiet anchor. I wanted to tell him everything: how I was terrified of losing my family, how I wasn't sure I could be the person he needed me to be. But every time I tried, the word stuck. One night, we were on the couch, watching some terrible sci-fi movie, when Eli turned to me. "If you go home, I'll come with you," he said, his voice casual but his eyes serious. I stared at him, my heart racing. "As what?" I asked, half joking, half panicked. He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Your friend. Your roommate. Whatever you need me to be." The idea of Eli in my hometown, meeting my parents, was both comforting and terrifying. I imagined their questions, their stares, the way they'd pick apart every word, every glance. But I also imagined Eli's hand in mine, his steady presence cutting through the noise. "I'll think about it," I said, and he nodded, letting it go. The next day, I called my mom and said I'd come home alone. I wasn't ready to bring Eli. Not yet. The disappointment in his eyes when I told him hurt more than I expected. But he didn't argue. "Just be you," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "That's enough." Ohio was exactly as I remembered: small, quiet, suffocating. My parents were warm but distant, their questions about my life in New York careful, like they were afraid of the answers. At dinner, my dad asked about Eli, his tone neutral but probing. "He's just your roommate, right?" I nodded, my stomach twisting, and changed the subject. But the lie felt wrong, heavier than ever. I thought about Eli, About the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd held my hand. I thought about the life I wanted, not the one I was supposed to have. By the time I got back to New York, I was a mess, torn between who I was and who I wanted to be. Eli was waiting when I got home, sitting on the couch with a beer and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How was it?" he asked, and I could hear the real question underneath. I sat beside him, my hand shaking. "I missed you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. His smile softened, and he pulled me close, his arms steady around me. For the first time, I let myself believe I could choose him, choose us, no matter what it cost. The weeks after Thanksgiving were a turning point. Eli and I stopped dancing around what we were, letting ourselves fall into something real. We kissed in the kitchen, held hands on the subway, laughed over late-night takeout. It wasn't perfect. Fear still crept in, whispering doubts about my family, my future, but with Eli, I felt braver, like I could face it all. One night, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was tight, hesitant. "Caleb, someone saw you in the city. With a guy? Holding hands." My heart stopped, but I didn't deny it. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "His name's Eli. He's important to me." There was a long silence, then a quiet. "We need to talk about this." I agreed. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Eli was there when I hung up, his eyes searching mine. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, pulling him close. "I told her about you," I said, and his smile was brighter than the city lights outside. We talked about the future, about telling my family, about building a life together. It wouldn't be easy, but it felt possible. Months later, we stood in Central Park, the air crisp with spring. Eli's hand was in mine, his thumb tracing slow circles over my knuckles. "You ever think about where this all started?" he asked, his voice teasing. I laughed, thinking of that night, the massage that changed everything. "Yeah," I said, "and I'm glad you kept going." He kissed me, soft and sure, and I knew this was my truth, my home. The world wasn't perfect, and neither were we, but we were enough. Together, we'd face whatever came: judgment, fear, love, all of it. Because sometimes, a single touch can spark a truth that changes everything. And sometimes, you're brave enough to let it.